All right. For these next two parts, I want you to take notes over them. Right now, you should have at least your plot diagram done for the story that you want to write. And when you're writing a story, there are two types of stories. There is character-driven stories and there's story-driven stories. I know that sounds weird, but that's what it's called. A character-driven story is where you just kind of have this character and they just kind of do different things. If you ever watch like the show like Community on NBC, there's these characters and they have all their little quirks and their descriptions and stuff like that, and then like different things happen to them. And then there is story-driven stories where it doesn't really matter who the characters are, the story is more important. TV show wise, like Criminal Minds, CSI, all like the police dramas. It doesn't really matter, that Gil Grissom likes bugs. That's just a little quirky, but it doesn't really matter. What's more important is the murder and who they find to capture. Who they find is guilty of it. So either way you're going, though, you need characters in your story, and so that's what we're going to discuss today. And so there are three kind of different types of characters. The first one is the protagonist, and the protagonist is the star of your story. Pro is a prefix meaning for, so they are usually going for something. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the good guy. I hear a lot of people call the protagonist the good guy of your story. Well, yeah, but it's your definition of good. Like the movie Megamind, where Will Ferrell's character, the guy with the big blue head, he's technically the protagonist because he's the main character, but he's not the good guy in the story. The good guy is the superhero, and so protagonist isn't good guy; it just means the main character. And so your main character could be a goody goody two shoe, or he could be, not. And so the antagonist is the opposite of that. They are going against your star. And they're not necessarily a bad guy. And so, and what makes good, compelling characters is that they're flawed. Your heroes have something about them that makes them not like completely pure. There is no good, there's no evil, there's only kind of in between. And there's even stories like Paradise Lost or like Frankenstein that just because it's defined as good doesn't really mean it's good, and sometimes you're kind of rooting for the other side to win. So it's just kind of how you're going to put your story. Most of you are going to make your main character a good guy. So good guy, bad guy. All right. The third type is supporting characters. And what they do is they help move the story along. So they either stir the pot and make more drama and more conflict, or they calm everything down and they release conflict or release tension into conflict. They don't have to be the friends or really know each other, but their paths will cross in your story. And so their purpose is to drive the story. These are what we normally call 2D characters. These ones are normally called 3D characters, meaning that you know everything about them, and by the end of the story or the book, they change for the better or for the worse. Supporting characters do not do that. They are 2D characters, meaning that they probably don't change, or if they do, it's probably just a little bit, not enough to really notice or for a person to care. Some other helpful hints. Make sure every character has a purpose. This is one of the ones that I always get caught on because I normally write like a character and they have like two best friends because that's how that's how it normally is in books. Like Harry Potter, just Ron and Hermione. But my characters are normally like the same, And so, like, I wrote a short story in college, and it was a main character, and he had two best friends, and everyone was like, "Those characters like are the same exact person. Just get rid of one of them." And I'm just like so upset. Like, no, they're different characters, and I was completely lying to myself. They didn't. They were the same, and so I deleted one, just gave the other one all that dialogue, or changed it up a little bit, and it worked out fine. So make sure that they have a purpose in the story. If they don't, you can get rid of them. That sounds harsh because you're, killing off someone, but whatever. The next part is that every character should do one of the following things. They should help generate or diffuse the conflict. There was a movie a while back, I think it was called like Never Back Down or something like that, like a fighting movie. And this kid wants to fight this other kid, but the tension about three-fourths of the way through the movie kind of like de-escalates. There is nothing there, and so it was like, oh, they're gonna live happily ever after. But then the main character's friend gets like ambushed and beat up and put in the hospital. Well, now the main character's gotta fight, for the honor of his friend and blah blah blah. So make sure that they are there to help generate that conflict. You hurt my best friend, now you must die. Kind of. I don't think they killed him. I don't remember. So I mean, it's got to do one of those things. Okay. It provides obstacles or helps the protagonist remove them. So if there's someone in the way, either that main character helps out or they, create another one. Um, like in Harry Potter, when they're going through all the different challenges in the end of the first movie or book or whatever, Ron has, help with one of them, and then Hermione helps with another one. So they're helping, removing obstacles. I wrote a book where one of the minor characters actually helped provided an obstacle for the main character that you find out later on. And so it's just, something that needs to be done to keep the story moving. If there's no conflict in your story, then there's no point in telling your story. And it adds dimension to the other characters, and it does that by, dialogue, and it's more showing than telling. The narrator maybe can't say something about themselves, but a character can. Or, they point something out. Like all those like romantic comedy movies where there's like the best friend who's, the chick best friend, and she says the things that the audience is, wanting to say, oh, but you like him and she likes you, or whatever. I don't know. I don't watch a whole lot of them. So, I mean, so it just adds to the main characters and makes them better or worse people. Okay? So that is part three, characters. We're going to go on to part four, point of view. It's very important that you know what kind of point of view you want to go into. Different point of views are used for different reasons. Your personal narratives that you guys wrote were all in first person, whereas these couldn't be in first person. Second person is kind of tough, but and then third person, and there's different reasons why you would do it, and so we're going to go through those. The first thing that you need to know, just kind of terms, dialogue and narration. Dialogue is when a character speaks, it's in the quotation marks. And the narration is when the narrator speaks, and that is when there is no quotation marks. So I hope you guys can see my mouse. This part right here is dialogue, and then this part here is narration. Okay? All right, so when you're trying to identify what kind of narrative it is, we're not looking at the dialogue because in dialogue they will always say I, unless you're crazy like my ex roommate's girlfriend and you talk in third person. But most of the time people say I went to the grocery store, not Levi went to the grocery store or whatever. So don't look at dialogue when you're trying to figure out the perspective because we don't care what the characters say and only the narrator's voice matters. So we're looking at narrator's voice. So when you're trying to figure out the narrator of a story and their viewpoint, here are some words that you want to look for within the narration. So first person usually says things like I, me, my, mine, we, us, ours. Second person is always you or your. There's really nothing else that it can be. And then third person is he, she, her, they, them. and also the characters' names. So, so those are the ways that you can tell. The story, where are you going, where have you been, was told in third person, just for the record. All right, so sorry, what is first person? It's where a narrator is actually a part of the story, which would be a character. They often use I or we. So an example would be I went home, Tim came over, I couldn't play. And a shout out to my friend Tim, I guess. So why would you choose first person? When you use first person narrative, you give your narrator a voice and adding more to that character. Um, I write a lot of my stuff in first person just because I like writing in that kind of a voice. I've always been told that my narrators have a good voice whenever I use first person. Or when I use dialogue, they tell me that it sounds like real people. And so I really like going for that kind of realistic fiction. And if you're into that, first person might be for you. If you're more into like a third person or more of like a fantasy or a crime or drama, something like that, third person might be better. That way you can kind of get multiple perspectives at the same time. It can be difficult if you are the opposite sex, if you're from a different location, or an extremely different age than your main character. I have a really hard time writing female dialogue and narration. My girls are always very tomboyish, just because it's like I don't know how a girl really. I mean, I listen to girls a lot, but it's like I don't really know how they talk, and it's hard to put into a character. And so when it's done right, I mean, it works really well. So, but if you're writing for a 16-year-old woman living in Harlem, don't make her sound like a 17-year-old boy from Iowa. And I'm not saying that you need to make all your characters based in Iowa. I'm just saying that you need to, if you're going to do it from a different location, there's different words and phrases that they use that you could kind of pick up on. You could also use first person if you don't want your narrator to be a reliable narrator, or if you want him or her to lie or withhold information. I wrote a story about a kid who turned out to be a school shooter. Don't ask. And the character, the narrator, was a first person narrator from a bystander's point of view, and I made him like withhold information like it wasn't his fault. Like he kept saying it wasn't his fault. He wasn't involved, but you could kind of tell that he was. Like he was in on the bullying and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to do that on purpose. Um, if anyone has ever read or seen the movie Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, it came out a couple years ago. It's told from the perspective of a 9-year-old boy with autism, and he's really smart, but he doesn't really know everything that's going on. I mean, when he sees his, flashbacks of his parents fighting, or when there's this main character who's really old, who's his grandpa, but he doesn't know it. The reader or the audience kind of has clues and hints, but the boy is really oblivious, and so that's stuff that you want to. I mean, if you want to do it that way, you can. It's not for everyone. I'm a part of a lot of writing groups, and it's a constant debate. Do I go in first person or third person? And so it's really up to kind of whatever you're feeling, and try something. I mean, go for it. Okay. Second person is usually for instructions. It uses you, um, and it's from your perspective. First, gather your materials. Add 1 cup of sugar to flour. And just to talk more about it, the only reason I would ever say doing it is like a choose your own adventure type of book. Like you're hanging out with friends, you're in the woods, there's 2 paths, which way do you go? Turn to page 4 for left, turn to page 8 for right. And then you can just kind of keep moving through the story. Really tough to do in normal a normal story. I've never tried it. I never wanted to try it. I never wanted me to be, I never wanted the person reading to be a character in the story. and you shouldn't. There's no reason for that. So that's second person. Third person is the narrator usually isn't involved. There are times where they are, like Winnie the Pooh's kind of a case of it. Like the narrator is kind of a character, but not really. So it just kind of depends on your perspective. So they're usually an omniscient force, someone outside of the characters. They tell other people's stories, and there's lots of he or she in the characters' names. And there's actually three types of this third person narration. The first one is omniscient, and that's where the narrator is all knowing. That is kind of, it's usually called like the God perspective. They can see and hear what everyone and everybody in your story is hearing, thinking, saying, doing, all those kind of things. So omni means all, scient means knowing, so all knowing. So example here, Tim was mad at Shay. He blamed her. Shay knew Tim would be mad, but she wanted to live her life. So in that short little three sentences, we know what Tim is thinking, what and how he's feeling, and we know what's going on in Shay's head as well. So I mean, we know what's going on in everyone's head there. Okay. You would choose this one because you can see everything that's going on inside all your characters' minds. It's really the easiest to write about, or easiest to write of in third person point of view. Um, but once again, this is a short story, so having all the knowledge might be too powerful for your story. I mean, if you're trying to write, 7 to 15 pages and you want to get everyone's perspective, that would be really hard to do. And so if that's not your number one option, the next one here is third person limited. It's normally limited to one character. It tells their thoughts and feelings. So our example, again, Tim and Shay were angry at each other. Tim was mad at Shay. He blamed her. Shay just left without saying anything. She left a note and then left him. Sad. I know. Very sad. But we had no idea what Shay is feeling or are thinking. We just know that she left. So it's kind of like what only Tim could see or know. And so you would choose this one because maybe you can't do several different characters, or you don't have the time or the space in your story. It is more difficult to do because you're just writing stuff, and you might write this, on accident. And I've done it before where I've had a third person limited, and I say stuff like, Blake thought, or whatever the name was, blah blah blah, thought that, blah 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 blah. And someone pointed out, like, well, how does your narrator know that? And it's like, oh, good point. So it is harder to do, but it's better. It could be better for a short story because you're kind of limited through how many different characters you have. And like I said, but it also does work better as a novel than a short story too. And then the last one, which I've never personally done, I just kind of heard about it and read about it. And it's third person objective. And this is where the narrator does not reveal any character thoughts or feelings. It's only the dialogue and the actions. Tim slammed the door, he walked upstairs and read a note from Shay. He kicked her trash can and started crying. Okay. And honestly, I don't know why you would use this one. I would really want the narrator to at least tell me a little bit of stuff. Yeah, we know that he's upset because of what he did, but still, it's just not enough. So my best options for you would be to do this one, that one, or this one. Would be my three options. Okay. So really, once you talk to me about your plot diagram, and once you know kind of who your characters are and stuff like that, you can get started writing. And so, in the next video, I'll talk a little bit more about the assignment and kind of what's due and when it's due, because we're kind of running short on time now. So, if you got any questions, let me know. Hope you have fun watching this video. No idea how long it is, so good luck with that.